hear me? Oh, praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. I was thinking about the lyrics to that song. Wanderer, come home, you're not too far. Wanderer, come home, you're not too far. And that is an encouraging truth, because as I'm going to share my testimony this morning, I'm going to share a little bit of what I thank you. I'm also going to cry. But it's okay, because I have backups. I'm not sure everyone's background here, but I'm fairly certain I've gone deeper in sexual sin than most of you guys. And I was way far off, and the Lord brought me back. And I'm grateful to His mercy, His kindness, His intervening in my life. I do want to open up with a word of prayer, though, and especially, I know we have some ladies in the room, but I'm going to share my testimony, and we're going to be talking about sexual sin, okay? So that's just the way it is. But I'm going to be sharing some things and talking about some stuff that I kept hidden in my life for nearly 20 years. I didn't tell anybody about the things I was struggling with. I'm going to talk about that in front of all you guys. So these things they're near to my heart. They're sensitive to me. They could be even embarrassing and shameful. But I want to also, be cognizant that this is a spiritual thing as well. So I want to pray and just ask the Lord, to just even guard our hearts. Because when we talk about this kind of stuff, it's very, very weighty, very real. So God, I just, Lord, we're not glorifying sin in this place at all, Lord. This isn't a competition on who's sinned the greatest, Lord. But where sin has abounded in our lives, God, your mercy is more. And that is so true, Jesus. That is so true. And so, God, as I share what you've taken me out of, Lord, as I share just the darkness, Lord, of the decisions that I've made, Lord, in my past, God, I'm asking, God, that you would come and you would meet us here, Jesus, and that you would show forth your power, Lord. I'm asking that there would be hope for those who are feeling hopeless, Lord. I'm asking that there would be faith for those who believe that they've gone too far, Lord. Would you build a faith inside of them, God, that they would make that decision that I can break free from this. There is a life outside of just constantly falling. Lord, and would your mercy prevail in this place, God, and would you be glorified, Jesus? God, so have your way. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. So, I want to start off and talking about my family life. So I grew up on Long Island and grew up in a conservative Christian home. I was one of 11 siblings. We homeschooled. I was the second oldest, so I had an older sister and myself, and then 9 after us. Got to be careful because Abe's around here. I know he's a math teacher, so. But so I grew up on Long Island, Christian home, conservative family, homeschooled. We were that, the family that shows up in the 15-passenger van and then their kids just keep coming out, Yeah, that was us. Being a sibling in that, sometimes it is embarrassing. I don't know if anyone here is from a large family, but it's like, all right, yeah, I don't know them. You're going into a store, you kind of want to do your own thing and be like, yeah. But my parents, godly parents, they loved the Lord. They brought us to church from an early age. I started attending Bible studies, going on men's retreats. I went to 3 Promise Keepers events. Anyone have been to a Promise Keepers event? Wasn't there one of them I remember was upstate? Wasn't it in Albany? Yes, I was at that one. Stand in the Gap, Washington, D.C. I don't know if any of you guys made it to that one, but so you would think, right? Building a foundation, talk about building a foundation. I was growing up in a Christian home. And my first exposure to pornography was at around age 12. But that's really when I first saw porn. But up to that point, I was already very curious and kind of exploring areas of sexuality. You know, you go into the encyclopedia, or you're going into National Geographic magazines, or even started like looking at album covers and things like that, or the lingerie sections and catalogs. And so I was already kind of looking for and exploring things. But my first discovery of actually pornography was at 12 years old. And it was on my uncle's computer. It was an unfiltered computer. And I just searched porn or something like that. And like what Nate had talked about yesterday, if I would have really understood what I started with that viewing of pornography, man, I'm not sure. I think that would have probably scared me into the reality of where I was going. And an interesting note on that is in our residential program, we're finding that a lot of guys are coming in just with a deeper exposure to sexual sin than they had in the past. It seems like the darkness in sexual sin is getting worse over time. And so now guys that have been viewing porn for maybe 5 years or so are actually a lot more darker and deeper into sexual perversion than they had been, let's say, in the past. So whatever. When I started viewing pornography, it was hardcore pornography right from the beginning. The first thing I ever saw was hardcore pornography. And I was like, what in the world is this? And I knew at that point, like, wow, that hit something that, those prior things that you're watching and softcore things that you're just kind of like fantasizing about, this was a reality. And I was like, I want that. There was a hook that took place at that point. And this is where it started my double life. Because I didn't tell my parents what had happened. I didn't expose anything to them. And in the meantime, my life and ministry was growing. Because I grew up in a large family, and we were respected in our church. We were one of the larger families there. And, I started playing violin on the worship team. And since I was 16... started playing violin on the worship team and started leading Bible studies. And as I'm growing in my ministry, I was regularly viewing pornography till now it became almost a daily event. If I could get onto the computer, either my dad's laptop or I had my own computer as I was getting closer to 18. And every day it was viewing porn. Again, didn't expose this to my parents at all. At around 18 is when I got a credit card. And when I got that credit card, my first purchase, I literally got the card in the mail, went right to the computer and signed up for a paid pornography site, for a paid view pornography site. And that opened up even more for me, even deeper darkness. And it was also around that time that little things would come to light with my parents. Like, because you can't hide this entirely. So a couple of little things would come up, but I would always minimize it. Oh, it was just a pop-up, or it was just some sort of advertisement. It was nothing that I'm not really dealing with this. Or, if I did struggle, it was like, yeah, I struggled a little bit, saw that, but I'm doing better now, I never came to a full disclosure with what was going on. And so at 18, I started working as an EMT, and I eventually got my paramedic certification. Starting at 18, I basically started working as much as I could. I loved working on the ambulance, so, EMS is a 24/7 operation, so I would have a full-time job, multiple per diem jobs, so I would work anywhere from 60 to 80 hours a week regularly. And that was to kind of keep things busy. You know, when we're hiding sin, we have to fill our lives with stuff to kind of like cover up that pressure that's going on inside, that we know that eventually this thing's going to get busted. So I'm filling my life with busyness, excessively working. I started to experiment with alcohol, started drinking around 21 or so, pretty much about the age. I didn't, because, you know, a good Christian wouldn't drink under 21. So it's interesting how we rationalize these things, isn't it? So messed up. But anyway, so I started drinking at around the age of 21, and I used to use that as my excuse for sexual sin, because if I had enough alcohol, then it really wasn't my fault. Like, you know, I would lose kind of control and be like, man, I drank too much and did something stupid. And also, obviously, the alcohol helps suppress that guilt and the weight that you're always living under when you have unconfessed sin. In 2008, I joined the Army. I joined New York's Army National Guard and did my basic in Fort Knox. And when I went to basic in Fort Knox, I said, I'm never going to move to the South. The humidity and the heat. Well, now I've lived in Kentucky for 7 years, but anyway. And so I did my basic training at Fort Knox, went out to Fort Sam Houston for a 68 Whiskey. It's a combat medic or healthcare specialist. That was my MOS. And worked in an infantry unit in Manhattan, the 69th down there. 2012, I got deployed to Afghanistan and did about 10 months in Kandahar. And any time that I was active with the military, whether it was in basic training, to my medic school in Texas, to even while I was deployed in Afghanistan, I always was always involved in the church activities there. I would always play either violin or bass at the church. And so these two lives that I had going all at the same time were such in a vast contrast. One was just a real nice guy, church attending. He works on an ambulance. He's joined the military. He's a medic. He plays in the worship team from the homeschool family, that big Imperato family, you know, well respected. I can't tell you how many times that family members would come up to me with their young sons and be like, why can't you be like Luke? You know, he's such a good role model. I was like, oh man, if they really knew what was going on behind the scenes. Because I had this growing life of darkness. And this was, like when Nate was talking yesterday about a spiral of degradation, this is how this works. There's no way around it. You can't avoid the destination when you're on a path making choices and steps to that destination. That's where you're going. The Word of God says so, and many testimonies back that up, including my own. So when I look back at my life and I think about the spiral of degradation that I got myself on, right? Starting with encyclopedias and the Macy's magazine, I think, that we'd get at the house, to CD albums and stuff, and then actually viewing pornography, giving over to self-gratification. Once you start viewing porn and self-gratifying, and that's masturbation, that's what I'm talking about, self-gratification, right? Once you start tying that kind of level of pleasure to the pornographic images, you're like linking a whole addiction, if you want to even use. I don't like to use the term addiction particularly because it's very overused, and it makes it sound like it's a condition or a medical condition, and it's something that you can't get free of. But when you associate pleasure to pornography, your mind starts to build these pathways, and this becomes a normal routine for you. And eventually, you will not be satisfied with the pornographic images that you're looking at. You don't just go in and start viewing porn and then go see this image that you like, right? And then the next time you go back, you view that same image, and the next time, and that's just your pornographic image. This is all you look at. No, that's not how that works. You start more and more, and then eventually it starts getting more perverted and more dark and more hardcore. And that's where my spiral started going. And then eventually, if you're living in this kind of an atmosphere, like, you want to start acting out on something. Like, you can't just, at least there's that desire. Like, and I understand, because I grew up in a Christian home, that there was kind of like, well, I had this battle raging because I couldn't live fully outwardly sinful, because then that would mess up a lot of things. Because first of all, you're an imperato, and imperatos don't do that. You're the homeschool kid. You've got this whole worship team and this whole facade, so you can't go really all out in your sin, because then it's just way too much to manage. But on the other hand, it's like I'm not really all out sold into this Christianity thing either, because I'm a terrible Christian. Like, I'm here in the worship team, and I know that, like, hours before I was up here, I was either viewing porn or in lust. Or I'd get down from worship, I'd sit in the pews and find the girls that I liked. I knew the girls that I lusted after, and I would sit so that I could stare and lust and take mental pictures to use later. So it was like, I knew that wasn't right, but I knew I couldn't go all in. So it's like, man, the turmoil that you have to live in to have two lives. And praise the Lord, it's turmoil, Because if we could really pull that off, I'm not sure if any of us would ever have the desire to be free. So after hardcore internet pornography, my first acting out is I went to a massage parlor. A group of friends from the ambulance company, they were like, hey, we're all going to get massages, and they give you a happy ending or something like that. I was like, okay, I don't know, what sounds something right. So that started my first acting out experience. Well, I did that for a couple of years, and I'm telling you, I would try to hook up with girls, and but this is what I blame my mom. Praying moms. So if you have a praying mom, thank her next time you see her. And if that's your wife, encourage her to keep praying. Because praying moms, their prayers, they have like a special weight in heaven. I'm convinced of it. Because I didn't lose virginity till my mid-20s, and I was trying. But this is a guy who's drinking, massage parlors, viewing porn all the time, and I couldn't get laid. And I'm telling you, what kept coming to my mind was my mom used to always say, may the Lord put a hedge of protection around him. I'd be like, stinking hedge of protection, Mom, stop praying that, would you? You're messing up my game. Well, eventually, what I got into was the whole world of bondage and dungeons, or BDSM. And I started paying upwards of $250 an hour to visit one of these establishments and participate in some of the most degrading, humiliating, shameful acts that one could be a part of. And after a couple years of doing that regularly is when my two worlds finally collided. I was dating this beautiful, pure, the classic homeschooler young woman, virgin, never kissed a guy, that kind of girl. And we were going out for probably a couple months, and I really thought that I had kind of gotten over the hump with this, that I was doing okay. It had been maybe 2 months since I had viewed porn. So, and listen, when you're viewing porn every day, 2 months without viewing porn is a big deal, right? So I'm like, wow, I've really made it quite some time. I'm doing okay. So she asked me, obviously it came up. I told her, yeah, I'm not a virgin anymore. And that was a shock for her. And she had to pray through that and see if she even still wanted to be with me. And then, and I told her a little bit about my past. Obviously, so everything that I've shared, right? All massage parlors and dungeons and a mess. And here I tell her, yeah, I had a little addiction with porn, but I'm okay with that now. That was my confession. That's not a confession at all. So I lied to her, basically, totally minimized what was going on. And eventually, toward the end of my time with her, this is how twisted I was. I did. I had what would be an affair. If we were married, it would have been an actual adulterous affair. I told her I got late at work on for overtime, which was regular on the ambulance anyway, so it was a believable story. We were tracking each other's locations, so I told her my phone was dying, put the phone on airplane mode, and went and visited one of the dungeons. And in order to get that going, I had to set up an email with them, and the explicit details in this email of what how you want your session to go, right? Well, maybe a month later, I was using her laptop for something, and I had my Gmail logged in. And I had deleted all those correspondence, but I hadn't deleted them from the trash folder. And she was not in suspicion detective mode. I really believe it was the Holy Spirit that just led her. She said, I just felt like I needed to check your trash folder, and she checked the trash folder and found this email. This is pure innocent homeschool girl reading stuff that she didn't even know what it was. And it was at that point that I realized I can't, this is going to ruin my life. I'm now in my late 20s. I've got a perfect girl who would have been an excellent wife and mother, conservative, homeschooled, everything that I wanted that I wanted outwardly at least in a girl, and I can't do this. This is wrecking everything. And I remember she called me over the house, and me and her parents were sitting there, and they're like, Luke, do you have anything to confess? Anything that you want to talk to us about? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? And they're like, we found an email. And as soon as they said that, I was like, no way. And it was like it was almost like, I don't know, like those movies where it zones out and everything's going on around and the mom's crying and there's like a death in the family, and she's crying and the dad's serious, and I'm just like zoned the whole thing out, and I was just like, I must be sick. There's got to be something messed up in my mind. Who pays $250 an hour for this nonsense that wrecks your life? I can't even keep a girl. And this is the perfect marriage. She would have been perfect. I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I need to get help. I need to do something about this. And that's an important place to be. That was a very important place for me to be, because it's at that place where you get desperate. And what the Lord could do with a desperate soul is perfect. It's like he's got you right where he needs you. Now, I don't know how in the world I chose to come to Pure Life Ministries other than probably my mom praying and the grace of the Lord, because I've talked now, because she was the Christian girl and kind of connected with church and church friends, now it all came out. There was no hiding this. This was it. This was done. My pastor was going to know what was going on. My parents were going to know what was going on. And it's not just like a little porn addiction. They were like, what's this? Oh yeah, I've been there 7 times, in the last couple years. Oh my goodness. So I spoke with my pastor and another ministry leader on Long Island there. And they said, you need to go to Pure Life Ministries. He actually, on the phone, I'm driving, and he says, you need to do 3 things. You need to quit your jobs, break up with your girlfriend, and move to Kentucky. I said, well, you know what? At this point, I'm like, whatever. because nothing is working right now and I'm wrecking my life. And I'm now 28 years old, and if I don't do something about this, like I'm going to get into my 30s and 40s, like I'm never going to get free from this, and I'm obviously never going to find a girl, and I'm like, this is just a mess. So sure, whatever. And so even in my delusion, but when I think back, I'm like, why did you do that though? Like what was motivating you to do that? Because I knew at that point I had a crossroads. Either I was going to go all into this Christianity thing or go all into my sin. Those were the only options that I had because it was wide open now. Everything was true. So I had, okay, should I try this pure life thing? Should I try to go all in Christianity? Or should I just say, you know what? I need to give that whole Christian thing a break. I'm going to go all into my sin, guys. I'm sorry. I know it's going to hurt you people, but I got to do what I got to do. That's why I look back. I'm like, it's the grace of the Lord that I chose to go to pure life. And even in my spiritual pride, I was trying to make it seem like I was doing the godly thing, you know. Hey guys, I'm going away to a biblical discipleship program, you know, and really getting my life in order. So if you, if you're looking for a testimony, you know, just, you know, give me a call. You know, so much delusion. Now, when I got to Pure Life Ministries, now keep in mind, remember, because up to this point, being exposed to the Christian world, I've read and gone to many weekend seminars, many books, probably 5 or 6 at least books on the topic of sexual sin. So, you know, after about 10 or 15 years of that, you start to feel either a little discouraged, or you get to like the mindset that I guess this is just a normal Christian thing. I guess this is just what Christians do, and maybe when I get married, it'll get fixed, or just eventually, at some point in my Christian life, it'll go away. You know, but I had never thought, it never even crossed my mind that the possibility that there was something maybe wrong with your relationship with the Lord, thought never crossed my mind. Like, what are you talking about? I'm a good Christian. I arrived at Pure Life Ministries in October 2015. Full of pride, spiritual pride. I was like, you know, I know what I'm doing. I've got this great walk with the Lord. Let me just come to Pure Life here, learn how to break free of my sexual sin, and then I'm going to get back to Long Island and help other guys come out. That was literally, I told my mom that before I left. I'm like, I really do believe that I want to help guys come out of sexual sin, right? And you know my mom, she's like, amen. I'll pray for it. No! So I get to Pure Life Ministries, and one of the beautiful things about Pure Life is it's like a equal playing field. There's no stars at Pure Life. I don't care who you are, where you came from. You've got a bunk bed in the Lazarus dorm. You've got 2 drawers for all your clothes. You've got a bin for your refrigerator stuff and a bag for your freezer stuff, and that's it. You could be a cardiologist who's making $1 million a year, or you could be the guy who was homeless and just getting by, and nobody really knows who's who around here. So when I got to Pure Life and realized that a lot of the things that I used to prop myself up with, like, hey, yeah, veteran just got back from Afghanistan a couple years ago, you know, oh, that's cool, you know, violin and worship team, yeah, Imperato, you know, big family, gospel community church, you know, yeah, oh, yeah, we know that, you know, like, none of that. All that was gone. It was just me. And now I'm here, and the year and a half before that, I was working in Manhattan, downtown, and that was where I was stationed in the ambulance there, but so I remember I woke up the next morning, and I'm hearing cows moving. I said, what did I do? But it became real, like, okay, Luke, this is serious right now. And I'm an all-in kind of guy. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to go all in with it. And I said, okay, I'm going to give this Pure Life Ministries everything I've got. I'm not going to hold back anything. So I said, I don't know much about this place. I don't know what they believe. And I didn't, actually. I did very little research on the ministry. And I remember just asking the Lord, okay, God, so what's going on? Like, what's my problem? And it was when I got to Pure Life that the Lord isolated the problem for me. And I remember very clearly one day sitting at, we call it the Lazarus dorm. It's the first dorm that you get to when you enter the residential program. And I was sitting outside at the picnic table and just kind of in maybe prayer or whatnot, and just asking the Lord, God, what's going on here? And he said, it's all pride, Luke. And I said, yeah, but what about my worship team experience? And all those times, what about all the times where people say, oh, your violin playing was beautiful, it really helped. And what about those times of worship that I know you were there? It was like self-righteousness. What about but Lord, I was serving in the military as a medic, self-righteous. EMT work, self-righteous. Bible studies, self-righteous. All your ministries, self-righteous. It was like he just wiped it all out, devalued everything, and said, Luke, your spiritual bank account with me is empty. You've got nothing. I had never seen it like that before. And all of a sudden, I began to realize that the reason I was at Pure Life Ministries was not because of my sexual sin. That's what got me there. But the reason I was at Pure Life Ministries is because the Lord was after my soul. He's like, I got to save your soul. I had never thought of it that way before. I had never approached my sexual sin that way before. I've always tried accountability and all these bouncing your eyes and different tactics and techniques and things like that. I'd never approached my sexual sin that this is a problem with your relationship with God. That's your problem. No one had ever even challenged me on that before. Well, that started one of the heaviest spiritual warfare battles that I have ever encountered. If you have any doubt that there's a spiritual realm of angels and demons, let me tell you, there is. You may not have experienced it personally, but I have. And if we really understood what we were viewing when we watched pornography, I think in some ways we would be terrified. It is so demonic. And what that started for me, when I began to realize that this was a fight for my soul, it was like hell on earth. I got sick. I couldn't move. I was so just under this oppression and turmoil. And when I closed my eyes, all I could see were pornographic images. And it was like porn all the time. But as the images were getting close, it was like a demon. And it was like another demon and a demon and a demon. I was like, I couldn't even think clearly. I had one vivid dream that was, I don't know, I don't even know where I stand on all this stuff, but I just could tell you what happened. I had such a clear, vivid dream one time that I was locked in a cage, and the devil was there, or a demon, or whatever it was, I don't know, and he said, Luke, you have a lifetime membership to this. I remember saying, no, this can't be true. And then another time, I was just drowning, or felt like I was drowning in a sea of lust, images and lust, and I couldn't get my, couldn't even catch my breath. I couldn't get out. There was nothing I could do about it. This was the kind of like demonic warfare. You see, when you get down in the spiral of degradation and you start into some deep darkness, this is what you're opening yourself up to. When you spend 30 or 40 hours a week viewing porn, you're opening up your brain and saying, demonic world, come in. Have your way. And I realized at that point that I needed help, and the only way I was going to get out of this was through Jesus Christ. And one of the times where I was being overrun with the lust and I felt like I was drowning, it's like I looked out and I saw the Lord, and he was just standing there. And he was like, Luke, are you done? Are you done? Are you going to cry out to me for help? And I remember crying out, Lord, have mercy. And in an instant, the darkness was gone. In that dream, it wasn't like that for the rest of my time. But it showed me the reality that this was a spiritual battle. And this was an issue with my soul. This was an issue with my heart. that I needed to surrender my will to the Lord. And over time, the Lord began to conquer more and more of my mind and my heart. And I wasn't bound up in that kind of demonic pressure anymore. It started maybe at when I used to close my eyes, it was 80, 90%, and then it would go down to 60%, 40%, over months, a period of time of really crying out to the Lord for brokenness and walking out in this repentance. And then now I can't think of the day. It has been years at this point where I've been hit with that much oppression and lust like that. The Lord has truly been able to set me free. And when I was looking at what a biblical example of this process would be, Nate used Romans 1 in the spiral of degradation. And what I just want to use briefly is the prodigal son. And that's in Luke chapter 15. And we're not going to spend a lot of time going through this, but when you look at it in a way of what we've been talking about this weekend, the spiral, you could follow the steps that he took, and they start to make sense. First of all, the first thing that happens with sexual sin is secrecy. Remember I said I didn't tell anybody what was really going on. And we counsel guys like this, and I worked intake on our residential program for a couple years, and if a guy told me that he didn't tell his wife what was going on, or if he hadn't really come to the light with his pastor, I just told him, you're not serious. Call me back when you're serious. I can't. No, we're not gonna move forward until you bring your sin to the light. That's the first step. You want things to happen in your life? If you're in sin, you want things to start happening? Start telling people what's going on in reality. People who care, don't just tell your friends who are also struggling. Talk to your pastor. Talk to your wife. Let her know what's actually happening. Things will start to go down in your life. It's good because what I've learned, and it's still true to this day, what I've learned is you must. It is not an option. You must confess, but you confess whatever you want freedom from. If you don't want freedom from something, then don't tell anybody, and you'll never find freedom from it. Confess whatever you want freedom from. So when I just look at my life and I look at the prodigal, I say he had to have been thinking and lusting after the far country for a while before he told his dad what was going on, right? So I'm almost certain that's where this started, a secret lust for something. Maybe he heard something from a marketplace or whatever. It sounded like, right, he was at a farm of sorts, heard something about this far country or out there, and he just said, wow, what is that? I wonder if I can go out there. And this starts thinking, all right, the process starts going. And I can almost guarantee you that's where this started with this son. So in verse 11, he says, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided them his livelihood. And I want to stop there because the first thing that the son does is starts telling his father what to do. Father, give me. You see, the son wanted to go to the far country. He had a desire for the far country. It was his will that was in charge. He wasn't under authority. He wasn't walking in meekness. He wasn't walking in obedience. So the first step is a strong self-will. You start doing what you want to do. Get me out from under the restrictions of my home, or maybe the restrictions of how I grew up, because I grew up conservative, homeschooled, and I was like, get me out of this. First step. Well, that's really the second step, because hiding it is, the first step is secrecy, the second step is the strong self-will. So the third step then is selfishness. What is the first thing he says to his dad? Give me. Step 3 is selfishness. Sexual sin is rooted in selfishness. Explain to me how you're really loving others when you go off into a room by yourself and basically have sex with yourself. How is that loving others? It's completely selfish. Father, give me, he says. Okay. And not many days after, in verse 13, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with prodigal living. Separation happens fairly quickly, and maybe some of you have been the recipients of that by your own parents, where a father or a loved one was involved in some sort of sexual sin, and you saw how it separated the family. And it does. Sexual sin will always separate you from the ones you love. Now, he leaves and he goes to this far country, and then our next step is a spiritual degradation. Because you can't, and there he wasted his possessions with prodigal living. You can't live in a world of sexual immorality and not expect that it's going to affect your life spiritually. You can't think that I'm going to live in perpetual and continual sin and then on the other hand say, yeah, but my life with God is going to continue to grow. It doesn't work that way. It's going to lead to spiritual degradation. The son started in a right godly home. I started in a home that was a godly home. We had daily devotions even. I read through the Bible several times before I was 18. But that spiritual life that my parents had established in me was rapidly degrading. And that's what happens when we spend time in sin. Once my spiritual life started degrading, then the step 6 is self-degradation. And I look back now, remember what I said, by my late 20s, I was doing things that if you would have said, Luke, at 13 or whatever, you would have said, Luke, I think you're going to do this. I would have been like, you out of your mind? I would never. 28 years old, I'm doing it regularly. And some of the darkest sins that we find ourselves in are just because we've continued down a path of degradation. And that's where the Lord, He turns us all, He gives us what we want. And we don't have control over where sin will take us. We don't. Remember, we're opening up our mind and saying, enemy, devil, come in, Satan, all your powers, come in. We lose control at that point, and he takes us where we want to go. Some of us, that could end up in homosexual desires, pedophilia with children, bestiality, bondage, domination, all sorts of sick perversions. I mean, the list keeps going. But it gets worse and worse and worse as time goes on. Finally, at step 7, let's read here, he goes, but when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, yet no one gave him anything. You see, when you finally get to that place at the end, where, and when I look back at my own life and I say, when I finally got to that place where that email was discovered and I realized I'd spent it all. I have nothing. I was starving. There was no satisfaction left in that sin anymore for me. I had tried it all. I had gone and lived out my fantasies. I did what I wanted to do, and further and deeper and deeper. And every single time I left hurt, shamed, and still hungry for more. It never satisfied. And now I'm in a pig pen, starving. Realizing he comes to his senses and he begins to realize who's got the better life. I had everything I wanted. I got to live my life the way I wanted it. And now I'm feeding pigs. Who had the better life? And then when you look back at the story, he says, when he came to himself, when he finally came to his senses, he says, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough to spare, and I perish with hunger? The servants of the Father had the better life. All the freedom that I wanted got me to the pig pen. And I realized that really the more free person was the servant of the Father. And you got to remember that when we're walking in obedience to what the Lord has given us to do, that's where true freedom is. It's not out doing whatever you want. So the first step out is to come to your senses. Stop blame shifting, minimizing, justifying. You know how many guys at our residential program blame their wife for their sin? That's the first thing. Well, it goes all the way back to the garden, right? It's this woman you gave me. Stop blaming anything. Stop, well, it's because of the trauma I had. Well, it's because of my loneliness. Or, well, it's because of, this, that, and I have an abusive father. And, well, it's because, okay. I'm not minimizing those things to say that they're not hurtful, that they're not harmful. Those things certainly affect your life. But that's not an excuse to sin. It's not. The Lord could help you through that. There's a way to live a victorious life no matter what your circumstances are. We have to determine in our hearts to come home. We have to make that radical decision that I'm going to leave everything of my old life and come home. And it's not just coming home in an outward way, it's turning to the Lord in my heart. I had to decide once and for all inside that I was going to follow the Lord wholeheartedly. There was not going to be any more hidden sin, hidden desires. I was all into following the Lord because that's what was the reality beforehand. Jesus wasn't really the Lord of my life. I was doing what I wanted to do. So I had to come home and say, Lord, I'm done with everything of that old life and I'm following you now. And then that requires a complete and full surrender. Because he says, right, I will arise and I'll go to my father and I'll say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. That's some humility right there. Make me like one of your hired servants. It goes from give me, Lord, right, give me what I want, to Father, can you make me something? I need you. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to the servants, Bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hands and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf here and kill it. Let us eat and be merry, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found, and they began to be merry. And I want to just end with an encouragement that I don't care how deep or dark or perverted you've gotten yourself into, or how deep, dark, or perverted your family member or friend is in. I don't care if he is dead in his trespasses and sin. this my son was dead and is now alive. The Lord, if you want to respond in sincere, heartfelt repentance and say, God, I am done. I was wrong. I was wrong to the core for choosing this. I was wrong to the core for maintaining this, for hiding it, for getting deeper in it. Lord, here is everything. I'm opening it all up to you. Change me, break my will, change it to following you, Lord. I want you to be the Lord of my life. And now you're walking in a new direction. The Lord will answer that prayer. And it's going to be a process, but the Lord will take you through it. I want to close with just a testimony of how the Lord has kept me, because, now I work as the director of the residential program. And it hasn't been easy, like Nate said yesterday. Still have to live in the light, right? Not perfect. But sometimes, you wonder, did this actually work? And what's the test? Remember when we talked about the foundations earlier? A trial comes in and there's your test, right? To see, what foundation is this house really built on? Well, July 11th, 2019, I went to the VA ER because I had a lump on my neck. I thought it was a cyst. It felt like a little cyst here. And it had been growing there for a month or two. And I went to the ER, and so the doctor felt that, yeah, we'll take a CAT scan and see what it is. So as I'm waiting for my results, the doctor comes back and says, well, we want to do an additional CAT scan because we think there might be something else going on. Okay, whatever. And they're like, the wheelchair is waiting right there. I worked 12 years in the medical field. You can kind of get the sense that something's off here. So whatever, I do my CAT scan, second CAT scan, come right back. And now you're kind of waiting to hear what's going on. And she says, she comes to us, yeah, you have a lump there. We actually found 5. And there's a cluster of lumps underneath your arm, around your heart, center of your chest. We're going to do some research and we'll get back to you, see what's going on. I'm sitting there like, what in the world could this be? Next thing I know, oncology comes up and says, hi, Dr. So-and-so from oncology. That's your cancer doctors. And I'm like, oncology? What is he doing here? And he's like, it's 90% that you have Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a classic presentation. And let me tell you, talk about everything changing in an afternoon. I had a lot of questions. He said, no, it's very good. It has a very successful cure rate. You'll have to go through chemo and radiation. We're going to get some additional testings, but I think you'll be okay. Well, I drove home that day and was just kind of in shock. And over the course of a month of several other tests and PET scans and scopes and a biopsy, and started chemo about 4 months later. And about 3 months or so of chemotherapy put me through one of the hardest trials I've ever been through. And I remember talking to my pastor at the beginning of it and saying, I'm not worried about dying. It's not even really, sure, it's cancer, but it's, they have the numbers on it. I've been treating it for 50 years. It's a very curable disease. My biggest fear is that I'm going to go back to my sin, because this is going to be a real hard trial, and there's going to be times I'm alone and I'm just struggling. And that was my biggest fear. And so I had 3 months of chemotherapy, had many dark nights. There was a time, I was in so much pain on an overnight, I had to get admitted to the hospital for 5 days because my white blood cell count was so low I couldn't fight whatever was going on in my body. They still couldn't figure it out. It took them 5 days. Antibiotics. I was in so much pain in the overnight. I remember just crying out to the Lord, I can't do this anymore. He kept me through it, though. Radiation. And at the end of the whole process, I could tell you, I didn't get back into my sin. Because the Lord's able to keep you. I look back, I said, I would have never been able to do that 7 years ago. There's absolutely no way. And I'm grateful that the Lord is able to defeat the powers of darkness. And if we live in a poverty of spirit, if we walk with the Lord in repentance, crying out to Him every time, like yesterday, coming back to the Father, back to the Father, back to the Father, and clinging to Him, Lord, help me today. Lord, help me tomorrow, God. I've stumbled, Lord. I need to confess. Bring it right to the light. I promise you, the Word of God is true. Jesus will get you through the thickest and the darkest storm. And that's my testimony.